Hello, welcome back to the channel. We have another game for our coveted Jank Week. I am John, this is my partner Jay, and we are going to commentate on a game of Hammertime versus Golgari.
I believe it's Golgari Midrange or Golgari Good Stuff or Golgari Delirium, because there are some Delirium cards in this list that I've seen. It looks like the players are starting off by rolling 13, it looks like, dice and counting them to see who goes first.
What is the point?
I don't know. The
degeneracy.
degeneracy.
Just a rousing game of Yahtzee before our...
I know. It's horrible. It looks like there's a few more ones on the Hammertime players' side, so potentially they will go second.
You know, in an official tournament, this is possibly time wasting. I will say this is, but it's Jank Week. You gotta have a laugh, right?
The thing is, if both players agree to it, it can't be called time wasting.
That is true.
So yeah. And you know, it's Jank Week, and counting dice must be this player's pastime. Must be what they live for. So, the matchup, Hammertime. I have been told that it's not a complete Hammertime deck that they're playing with today. So, it may be missing some key parts. Who do you think is favoured in this matchup?
It would depend partly on who goes first, for me. The Hammertime deck does have such explosive opening turns that it tends to overrun most strategies before they even get onto the game. So the Golgari.
So knowing that Golgari is going first, how does that change your assessment?
I would think the Hammertime deck might still be slightly more favored if they draw Godly. And that's one of the sort of downsides. Hammertime is, in a lot of ways, very similar to like a combo deck, right? It needs the pieces to do its thing.
Agreed.
And has a few little resiliencies. The Golgari midrange deck tends to be just value cards at most draws. I would give this to the Golgari deck, especially because Golgari has access to cards like Thoughtseize, turn 1 removal for the turn 1 creature plays that the Hammertime deck would have.
Yeah, I think I'm in complete agreement with you. A turn 1 Thoughtseize, being able to take the hammer, or if there's no hammer, being able to take a good creature or something like that, or even just turn 1 play a swamp, hold up Fatal Push from the Golgari midrange player. The hammer time is just gonna have a bad time, and it looks like the midrange player has a hand with both lands and spells, and one of those spells is a Fatal Push, another one is an Abrupt Decay, and the other one is a Scavenging Ooze. So 2 removal spells and a creature.
Lands and spells.
Exactly. 4 lands may be a bit steep, but I believe because the hand is so good, you know, you've got a threat, you've got 2 removal spells, you'll probably draw into some better stuff. It's an okay hand to keep. The Hammertime player is putting it back. I think Hammertime, you really have to mulligan until you get a hand with the hammer or a way to get the hammer, because the deck relies on the hammer. There is almost no plan B.
It is the namesake of the deck, and it is, like I said, it is a combo deck disguising itself as an aggro deck most of the time.
Agreed.
But it would depend. I'm not entirely sure on the sideboard plan of this player. Like you said, the deck isn't necessarily a complete build of what we would know to be a Hammertime deck. So that we may see some cards that we don't normally see that may play out a little differently.
Potentially. And another thing of note is one of the removal spells in the mid-range player's hand is Abrupt Decay, which can hit a hammer as well, or a Sigarda's Aid. So it's not... This hand looks very good against Hammertime.
Yeah, especially since the creature base of Hammertime tends to go nowhere higher than 2 mana, but we may be in for a surprise, we're not sure. And this is exactly what I was talking about. The turn 1... kill the 1 mana creature. Tempo is entirely on the Golgari player's side at the moment.
And they, right on curve, get the Scavenging Ooze down.
Oh, that is a very relevant creature here, especially if 1 gains life, 2, any creature that has been removed is just fodder for this thing. It will just get bigger over time. If the Hammertime player doesn't deal with the creature now, a turn 2 Kemba with no equipment. This is an unfortunate play.
Yeah, potentially they maybe should have waited to play Kemba until they had some sort of equipment, but if it was going to die anyway. Oh, and here we see a really brutal draw. Another fatal push, and they're able to exile the 2 cards from the Hammertime's graveyard
Oh,
and a swing in for 4. And now they're on a 5-turn clock, well, 4 more turns. And their hand does not have much in it. And they just have to pass the turn back. It looks like they have a 4-drop.
Could be one of the spicy additions to the deck, but I think it may be too little too late. Oh, and a Vraska on turn 4?
Yeah, it looks like a Veraska, and now this is just going to be too much value for the Hammertime player to be able to beat anything that the Hammertime player plays with mana value 3 or less. Veraska is just going to eat up.
Yeah, this is what I was saying about how Golgari just has so many just valuable creatures, valuable cards going into it. And like you said, the Golgari mid-range player opened with 4 lands, couple of removal spells, but that was enough for a deck like Hammertime that relies on creatures, but doesn't really run as many. And this 4 is interesting. I'm not entirely sure.
I believe it's a 5/3, and it makes equipments cost 1 to equip, but I could be wrong. And we now see a morph. I believe that is a Den Protector under there, so it's now morphed as a 2/2, and Scavenging Ooze being a 4/4 doesn't want to lose it, so does not attack in.
Fair. And again, it's an ideal blocker in this position as well, right?
Yeah, so it will be able to trade with the 4-drop creature on the Hammertime side, but it looks like the 4-drop creature is legendary, and they have another one in their hand.
So the Hammertime player is willing to offer the trade. We'll see how this plays out. And he looks like he's going after the Vraska. I believe. Is he going for the Vraska or going for face?
I'm not sure. Oh, they went after Vraska, and the Golgari player just lets them take it.
To be fair, Vraska's still on the board. Nothing actually has been lost. And we can see in the Hammertime player's hand, he has a land, he has the other copy of the 4-drop, and an instant spell which instantly equips equipment to warriors, which unfortunately has no equipment on the board to make that relevant.
Oh, and here we see the synergy. They're able to flip Den Protector over, Megamorph it, and they get back Fatal Push from their graveyard. And because they sacrificed a land to Vraska, Revolt is now triggered, and the Hammertime player is now on a 1-turn clock. They have to do something this turn, and Vraska can just shoot anything mana value 3 or less. So this does stop the Golgari player from winning this turn unless they have any removal, which they might do, and they can potentially sacrifice another permanent with Vraska to try to draw into removal. Oh, and that is what they do. I would like to note that they've now drawn 4 extra cards this game through Vraska. Oh, and exactly the same play.
Oh my word! And there was a few things that went wrong for the Hammertime player there. He was mana flooded. Normally this runs 20 or less cards in hand. Oh, I do see a Felagard retreat. That is a spicy addition.
Yeah, 3 of them in the main board as well.
So he may, I guess, with Kemba having cat synergy. I can kind of understand why, but again, this is normally such a low mana count deck that the landfall trigger doesn't normally happen. And normally with Felagard retreat style decks or decks that use it, they try to get as much value out of that card as possible. I don't think this deck can do that.
Yeah, they want to be more grindy. I'm surprised about some of the Hammertime players' choices. I think that they are missing some cards, and given some more time to get their deck together, they'll maybe show up with something slightly better. And I think the Golgari mid-range player just had the perfect draw, it seemed. They had answers to everything, and the Hammertime player lost from the time Vraska was played, pretty much.
It just feels like every time I play against a black deck, they always have the Fatal Push.
And they always have the Thoughtseize.
And they always have the Thoughtseize. It wouldn't have surprised me if he played a 5th Fatal Push there.
Well, I think
the way that was running.
he did play one Fatal Push twice because he was able to get it back through Den Protector.
Oh, and there is some good synergies, and this is what I was talking about with how the Golgari deck just tends to have steam, and just cards are just valuable on its own. A lot of cards can carry the game. Vraska, for example, could potentially carry the game on her own. Ooze as well with enough removal, sort of splashed in, but it could also then profitably block.
Agreed. Other cards like Den Protector are 2-for-1s. In that game it got back a Fatal Push. So, it was a 5 mana 3/2, but it removed a creature, which is pretty good. Murderous Rider, I believe, is in the deck, which again is another removal spell. And then something like Grim Flayer can just take over the game if it gets to hit in.
For everyone at home, what does Grim Flayer do?
Grim Flayer is a card from Shadows over Innistrad. Actually, no, I believe it's from Eldritch Moon. But it is a green-black creature for 2 mana. And it's a 2/2 with Trample. And when it deals combat damage to a player, Surveil 3.
Oh.
And Surveil 3 means you look at the top 3 cards of your library and you may put any number of them back on the top of your library or into your graveyard. So you can put 1 on the top and 2 into the graveyard if that one card is what you want. Or you can put all of them into the graveyard. And it does 2 things. It fuels Delirium, which I will get to in a second. And it also smooths out your draws immensely. If it's able to hit just once or twice, it can be devastating for your opponent. It can sort of do what like a Fable of the Mirror Breaker Rummage does, where you get rid of your bad cards and draw better cards by making it so you don't even have to draw the bad cards in the first place, just put them in your graveyard. And Grim Flayer also has an ability where it gets +2/+2 if you have Delirium. And Delirium is if you have 4 or more card types in your graveyard.
So they get an ability when they reach a certain number of cards in the graveyard, just their own graveyard, right?
Just their own graveyard, yeah.
Yeah.
And there is another Delirium card that is commonly seen in mid-range decks. Probably not in Pioneer, but definitely in the old Standard, and I believe it's in this list, is Ishkanor, which makes 3 1/2 spiders with reach if you have Delirium.
Oh, that is a... again, like I keep saying, the Golgari deck just have a lot of cards that can win games on their own, potentially. And the Hammertime player is going to take the play in this second game, and it looks like he's mulliganing again. The Golgari mid-range player opting to keep their first opening hand once more.
Yeah, it looks like the Golgari mid-range player has a Thoughtseize, a Go for the Throat, and it looks like an Outland Liberator. For those who don't know Outland Liberator, it's a card from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. It's 2 mana, it's green, it's a werewolf. The front side is a 2/2, and you can pay 1 mana and sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment, notably to destroy a Sagada's Aid or a Hammer in this matchup.
It is a very commonly seen card in Explorer and in some metas where artifact decks tend to be quite rampant. It's a good green card because it serves the role of both artifact removal and just being a good value creature.
Agreed. It's in fact seen in some modern sideboards, just showing the power of the card. And the backside is especially powerful. It's a 3/3, and whenever it attacks, you may destroy a target artifact or enchantment. So
that is insane.
Repeatable artifact or enchantment removal is great. I believe it's in this deck for things like Hammertime, but one of the biggest decks in the Pioneer meta right now, Fires, runs so many enchantments, and if they are not able to remove the Outland Liberator, it can just start removing them.
Speaking of removing them, though, Thoughtseize turn 1, typical. Taking 4 life for it, though. Pretty dangerous against a explosive power deck, but the Hammertime player again is running out of hammers as it's it has the pieces to equip it, just not the cards to.
Yeah, the thing is, if Hammertime got a hammer off the top here, which I don't think they will, it would be very lucky.
It would change this game entirely.
Yeah, then they would be able to place a Guardian's Aid, equip the hammer, and immediately attack for 11.
Yeah, however, and with this particular creature, if it does deal combat damage, it can sacrifice itself and deal damage equal to its power to any target.
Yes, so it would effectively win the game there.
Unfortunately, that's not what happened.
The hammer now gets another draw step to potentially try draw into a hammer because the mid-range player tapped out for Outland Liberator, and they play a Kemba.
I guess the Kemba play here is partly to stop the werewolf from flipping. As you said, the backside is quite powerful on its own, especially with Zagata's Aid on the board. This may make the Golgari player decide whether or not it wants to sack the creature to get rid of the Zagata's Aid, but I think in this position you just want to take care of the hammer, right? The Zagata's Aid is kind of vanilla.
Yeah. I believe that token there may be used for day and night with the Outland Liberator. Oh, and it looks like the Hammertime player may be getting an actual token.
Sometimes it's good to come prepared. Unfortunately, the Hammertime player did not come prepared with hammers.
Yeah, and I think the Hammertime deck list, I've not seen the full list, but it doesn't seem like they play many equipments apart from the 4 hammers, a one-of Ember Cleave, and then it doesn't really count, but they play Lizard Blades, which is important because the reconfigure is not an equip. So I believe things like Kemba, Sagada's Age don't are not able to be used.
Actually they are.
Are they? I did not know that.
So reconfigure is sort of another term for equip, but specifically for those cards. You may see sometimes Kemba will get played, and there will be, for example, a Rabbit Battery, and they can turn to attack with Kemba for 3.
Okay, I did not know that interaction. That's very interesting. And here we see the Liberator flip and then immediately just attack, destroy the Sagada's Aid, and now a Liliana's come down. And I think it's just game
destroying the only creature on the board. The Golgari mid-range player is playing a card face down.
Yeah, probably another Den Protector. Here we see a creature, but Liliana can just make him sack that creature.
This particular creature is interesting. It's an evasive creature. It could pay you can pay 1 mana to make all non-cowards, or all cowards cannot block, and then he could also turn a creature into a coward. Unfortunately, looks like the Hammertime player once again flooding on land.
It looks like Lily has gone up to 6 loyalty because they chose to use Den Protector to get a fatal pushback. Oh, and they've chosen to ultimate Lily and separate the opponent's lands into red and white.
You know, it's moments like these where you start to think, is Liliana ban-worthy?
Oh, I think that is a terrible take.
I don't know, mate. I feel like a lot of black cards just tend to do everything all the time very consistently.
They are pretty good. Oh, and a red mana off the top after selecting all the mountains instead of all the plains. That's just to feel bad. I think the Hammertime player probably would agree with you that Lily needs to be banned.
Yeah, unfortunate for him, but that is our game. 2-0 to the Golgari mid-range player. Congratulations to him. And we'll see you again for the next one.